Welcome to Astrology Investigates. This is a missing person chart for Carlee Russell. And this chart is based on the time of the 911 call that she placed as she was attempting to rescue a toddler who was wandering along the road, the interstate, at night by himself. If you're not familiar with the case, go ahead and look it up. It's pretty interesting, and we're following it live as these things go on. And we're doing this particular chart because we actually have some semblance of the time for the 911 call itself, which we rarely get. So, and again, these are all speculative charts. This is all new. We don't know how much of this is accurate or not because these are all new ways of doing charts. So feel free to set the chart up on your computer at home or use the image that we're presenting here and follow along, and let's take a look. Okay, so this is a very, very distressing missing persons case. And also, too, this is one of the few times we're actually given the time of the 911 call, which makes a difference, I think, in my experience, my limited experience, when it comes to trying to locate missing people and this sort of thing. So Carlee Russell, what we know so far is that Carlee Russell called 911 as she was after she pulled over to rescue a toddler who was walking along the interstate at night. As she was trying to talk to the toddler, the operator, 911 operator, is on the phone, and you can't hear the child respond. So we don't know if the child was responding verbally or not. And the next sound you hear is Carlee screaming, and that was the end of the call. Now, this 911 call, according to law enforcement and the newspaper publications, it was July 13th, 2023 at 9:30-ish p.m. So I've set the chart for 9:35 because they know exactly what time the call came in. I'm a little surprised that they're being so vague about it, but you know, whatever. I'm not law enforcement. And the location, or her location, was Hoover, Alabama. Now, according to the reports also, there are surveillance cameras on the interstate, and they could see her blinkers, her flashers on her car at a distance. So they couldn't really see much in the dark, but they could definitely see her flashers on at a distance while this call was occurring. So this is all very weird as these things go. So when we set up the chart for the 911 call, and this is how I'm doing it, your mileage may vary, you may do things differently, but we'll work with this and see how this plays out when we get more information. When we set up the call for the 911 chart, the first house represents the person taking the action. Luckily for us, the person taking the action and making the 911 call is also the same person who's missing. This simplifies everything tremendously because we don't have to figure out which ruler goes to which. She is definitely the first house. So with 21 Aquarius rising on the first house in the terms of Jupiter, we would expect someone who is more generous and humanitarian in her nature. I don't know her personally, so your guess is as good as mine. And what we're going to do is we're going to look for the ruler of the ascendant, which would be her, to give us more information about who made this call, or in this case, the missing person. So with that said, we know, let me get my little pen here, that Uranus, depending on whether you use traditional or modern rulers, we know that Uranus is the modern ruler of that Aquarius ascendant, and it's in the third house, which would make all kinds of sense. I would expect she would have been in a local road or in a local area because it's the third house, and also the third house rules phone calls and communications, and she is the one making the 911 call. So far, this makes all kinds of sense. Now, if we use Saturn as the ancient ruler or traditional ruler of Aquarius, Saturn is now intercepted in that first house, and that is a little bit more problematic. So we'll work with the ancient rulers first, and then we'll use the modern rulers to try and keep this a little organized. So with her traditional ruler, Saturn, intercepted in the first house, meaning that it is hidden from view or it's blindsided. There's some things that we can't see. It's like you've got horse blinders on, right? With Saturn intercepted in the first house, this would suggest to me that she is actually not that far from the interstate. which doesn't make any sense logically, because I'm sure they've already been out with search teams and search dogs, and if she's anywhere near there, they would have easily found her. So the interception means something is hemmed in or locked in or like sandwiched between something, may not be as descriptive as we would hope it to be, right? Now, what's interesting is if we stay with the traditional ruler, Saturn, what aspects does Saturn make? Well, the second most important planet in any chart is the moon, right? And the moon is here making a, sorry, let's set this up for you, a T-square to her ruler, Saturn. Maybe a different color. Okay, so if she's here, right, and the moon is here representing the environment and timing, the moon is also in the 4th house. Again, this suggests that she's actually physically near the area where she disappeared. That's interesting. Because again, you would expect houses nearby. I literally don't know the area, and I haven't seen it, and obviously they haven't shown us a map or anything. But this would suggest that there's a residence, a domestic residence, domestic real estate, even if it's a cave, right, or a bunker under the ground, that is nearby, and that is where she's located. Now, when we look at this T-square, right, let's look over here. So the T-square here involves Mars and Pallas. Now, Mars and Pallas Athene, and this is an asteroid, in case you guys are unaware. Mars and Pallas Athene are sitting in the 7th house of open enemies. So this, when we say open enemies in this particular case, this would indicate or suggest people that she's in direct confrontation with, which would be her abductors. Obviously, she's not trying to be abducted. She was there to rescue a toddler. And judging from the screams in the phone call, she wasn't really interested in going. So with that said, Mars conjunct Pallas Athene, indicating the abductor or the person she's in conflict with, would suggest to me a couple of things. One, it was a male, okay? Also, the involvement with Pallas Athene I thought was interesting. There are some religious themes or cult-like themes that seem to come up here in this chart. I'm going to show you what I'm looking at. So, let's use green. So here, with Mars and Pallas together representing the abductor, right? And then the moon, which represents the events and timing of things, conjunct Vesta. These two things, to me, suggest the possibility that there's some type of religious overtone, right? And I don't mean religious in a good way. I mean religious in a not good way. And the first thing I thought of was cult, right? Some kind of weird cult or cult member, like they've abducted her as part of some weird ritualistic, that was what I was looking for, the word ritual, right? There's some ritualistic association with their purpose for abducting her, right? So maybe they were spiritually or religiously guided to do this, you know, by some wackadoodle cult leader, or God forbid they're using it for some type of religious sacrifice. But religious and ritual come together with this particular combination in my mind, which suggests that there may be cults involved. Now, I looked up, because Alabama is just a strange foreign place I'm never going to go to. So I looked up cults in Alabama. Like, are there cults in Alabama? Like, Alabama's a pretty, like, isolated place that nobody really hears about, or at least I don't. And wouldn't you know it, oh my God, look it up yourself. Go to Google, type in cults, Alabama. And apparently, they got some real colorful things growing in Alabama when it comes to cults. Wow, just wow. I'm going to let you enjoy that rabbit hole you go down. But it did absolutely confirm the presence of many cults that pop up in Alabama on a regular basis. So there's the very real possibility that this is some type of cult thing, that cult member rather, that she's been abducted by. And that's pretty terrifying. Now, if we look at the 7th house, right, what we're looking at also is this one. You know, the other people, the people that we're facing. So we know Mars is here because Mars is involved in his T-square that we just talked about, right? But if you look, Venus is right there too. So that also suggests the possibility of a woman. Now, With that, Venus is in the terms of Mars. Mars impels term Mercury. So Venus, whoever this, and it's at 27 degrees. So whoever this woman is would appear to be under the influence or control or domination of the Mars character, right? He would certainly be more, have a little bit more strength than she would. But also to remember the 27th degree of any planet indicates a situation coming to an end or a close. So whoever this other party is, because it's more than one person here, and I say that because one, we have Mars, two, we have Venus together in the 7th house, right? Suggesting that there is more than one person involved as her confronter or abductor. And also to look, that moon is in Gemini. It's a dual-bodied sign, which always, well, most of the time, also indicates multiple people, at least 2 people or more. So there's the very, just looking at this for these planetary pictures, to me, this absolutely looks like there is more than one person involved here. And most prominently configuring here, it's a man and a woman, which would make sense if there was a toddler on the highway, because toddlers are very attached to their mothers. So for that child to be out there on the highway like that and not screaming and crying and panicking, the mother had to be nearby. So that would absolutely, to me, in my mind, absolutely confirm the presence of a woman. But the thing about it is, whoever this woman is, she's not hanging around for very long. So it's only a matter of time before she's out of there. Out of there! All right, now, with the moon and Vesta together in Gemini, again, multiple people, again, like a cult, this like cult-like thing. And the other thing, too, is if you look down here, Admetos is also with Vesta and the moon. Now, Admetos is a trans-Neptunian, and Admetos typically rules, let me see if I remember this correctly, great force or great might. Hold that thought. Hold that thought. I think it actually may be things that come to a stop or a standstill. Right. It does, in fact, represent things, obstacles, things that come to a stop or a standstill. It also rules underground things. So is it possible for anybody who knows this area around Hoover, Alabama, is it possible for people in the area she's disappeared from, or just off the sides of the interstate, to have underground bunkers, like living under the ground out there? Tunnel people? I don't know. So Admetos with Vesta and the moon in Gemini suggest, 1, tunnels and highways, throughways, byways, avenues of travel, right? Tunnels, alleys, well, you know, bridges, things that are on bridges, subways, things of that nature. And combined with Vesta and Admetos, it's almost, there's a suggestion that you've got like literally tunnel people, cave people, like people living under the ground together as part of some weird cult thing. And I know I sound completely crazy talking about this, and you know I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I thought this was interesting because this is what it looks like to me, and it was so far out there, I thought I'd share it with you. So, you know, you can certainly take a look at the chart and see what you can determine from it. I'm literally spitballing here. I could be completely wrong. But if I'm even close to right, God, how scary is that, right? Jesus, people living in tunnels under the road, abducting people. Whew. Anyway, so there's that. Now the question, of course, is where did Carlee go? Because it's a missing person chart. Where did she go? And here's what I would say. If we're still using traditional rulers and Saturn is her ruler, Saturn is in the 1st house, which means that she is literally not very far from where she physically disappeared from. She's literally in the immediate area. If we use traditional rulers, and I'm looking at the chart correctly. With Saturn in the term of Venus here, there is the suggestion that this is a more domesticated environment. So even if she's in an underground bunker, it is an underground bunker set up to be like a home, right? It's not an underground bunker that nobody's been in or done anything within 100 years. Like, it's actually set up to be a residence. And also too, Saturn in Pisces. Let me check the directions on this. Okay, so determining the directions in a horary is very confusing. And typically I don't get it exactly right. Like, I get in the right direction, but it's, you know, left or right. If you draw a straight line, it's along that pathway. I know. It sounds like I'm cheating. Okay, so For all intents and purposes, this would suggest that she is west. Wherever she's at, she's west. And at that point, if you draw a north-south line, right, head in the westerly direction from where she disappeared, and draw a north-south line, she's somewhere along that north-south line heading west. And again, she's in the immediate area. She's not that far from where she disappeared, which is pretty frightening that they haven't found her yet. But we don't know. I mean, maybe there's residences around there. I mean, maybe there's actual honest-to-God houses, like just off the interstate, or maybe there's cabins and it's near woods, or there's underground bunkers. We don't know. For those of us who don't live near there, we have no idea what the terrain looks like. So your guess is as good as mine. Okay. All right. So now we've done that with the traditional rulerships. Oh, you know, the next question, of course, is will she be found? And, well, I don't know. I'm not going to make a prediction about whether she can be found or will be found, because it's just too, I don't want to get false hopes up, and at the same time, I also don't want to crush hope in the event that she can be found. Now, I will say in terms of will she be found, we look at, or we can look at, right, the moon, because that's the event, the timing and the event, right? And what aspects does the moon make? Well, the first aspect the moon makes is going to be a square to the vertex. So we may get, based on that, we may get some suggestion about where she is, or some type of tip or lead, but I don't know that it's going to be very fruitful. And they say that with these charts, with Harari charts specifically, not necessarily 911 charts, you have to follow the path of the moon around to give you some information about how things will play out. And in this particular case, the last aspect the moon will make is going to be, oh, I'm so sorry. Here we go. It's going to make a couple of aspects. So the first thing it's going to do, or the next to last aspect it's going to make, is a sextile to Venus, but a square to Neptune. So again, the possibility that they may be given a tip or a lead, and possibly even coming from this woman that we see leaving the situation, but it will prove to be an empty-handed lead or a dead lead. So what is it, a day late and a dollar short sort of information. After that, the moon then moves into quincunx with Pluto in that 12th house. So, and that's a long way away. So it could be a fairly good chunk of time before anything is actually discovered about her whereabouts. And that is not what anybody wants to hear. All right. Now, if we use the modern rulerships, Aquarius is ruled by Uranus, right? So we know she was the one who made the phone. She was the one who made the phone call. Right? Uranus is right there in the 3rd house of phone calls. Makes all kinds of sense. So what does that tell us? Well, Uranus is pretty late in the sign. The only aspect that Uranus applies to, the only aspects that Uranus applies to, is a sextile to Neptune and a trine to Pluto. So this is promising, right? This is promising. And this would suggest that we should get some useful information in terms of identifying where she is. The other thing that this Uranus does is it makes, again, another sextile to the sun. So the sun also, again, we're right back to the 7th house, right? The sun rules that 7th house, which suggests that there may be some vital information or something important coming from, or some assistance, right? Because trines are always supportive. Some assistance coming from the 7th house, which would be her abductors. And again, we keep seeing this person leaving the situation. This may be the person who leads us, or at least gives an idea what has happened to her. Whether we actually recover her is a whole other conversation. So, I'm going to end this here. This is literally off the cuff. I could be completely wrong. I'm doing this because I'm hot and the world is upside down and I needed something else to think about. And I thought you guys might enjoy a little astrology mystery to work on in your free time as well. So we can watch this unfold as the news reports come out. So let's see what happens. And again, look up Cult and Alabama. when you have time, because that's quite the rabbit hole to go down. There's some real, it's got to be something in the water down there. There's some real strange stuff happening out there. And the only other thing I was going to say is, so I was wondering about this kid, right? I mean, some of this stuff doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out, like toddlers, their mothers nearby because they're calm, blah, 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 blah. I was thinking, and now I'm spitballing. This is not based on any solid astrological anything. I'm literally spitballing here. If Mercury rules young children, right? Mercury is conjunct Vulcanus, okay? And this would suggest that there is something wrong with a child. Either the child has some type of scar or deformity, or the child is a little slow with some learning disabilities. There's something not 100% about the child if Mercury in this chart does in fact rule the child. That's not a happy thought either. And Mercury makes a square to Jupiter, which also suggests that the child may have a leg length discrepancy or some type of growth issue, maybe literally small for his size, underdeveloped. But there's something that is not developing naturally or ideally with this kid if Mercury rules the toddler. So that's it. That's what I got. I think she's literally in the immediate area. I think she's below ground in some type of residence below ground. That doesn't make any sense. Maybe, I don't know. And she's literally within the immediate area. So, and in a westerly direction. So draw a line west and then go north-south on that line. And she's somewhere around there. Also, the abductors, there's more than one of them, definitely two or more. The male, it's a male and a female, or multiple males and a female, but it's definitely a male and a female minimum. And the male is the one who initiated the action. The female is on her way out. She's leaving voluntarily, not by death, I don't think. And also, again, I'll say it again and again and again, cult. There's some kind of weird cult tie with these characters, which is even more terrifying. So let's see what happens. Let's see what happens. Godspeed, and I hope they find her before anything horrible happens. All right, if you learn something before I do, post it in the comment section, and we'll talk to you guys later.